interviewing Karen Thomas. She is the founder of Naturally Recovering Autism. And Karen, I have interviewed her in the past. I love the things she has to say. She has a great podcast. She has a book. And today, what we're going to talk about is, should I homeschool my child? That's sort of the subject matter here. But we're going to talk about some of the other things too. And I'm going to tell you right away, we're not going to tell you whether you should or should not homeschool your child. What we're going to do is try to help you think through some of the things that you might want to consider as you are considering homeschooling your kids. So hello, Karen.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for coming here again. So Karen and I, we're going to do this interview in a couple of days, but we decided it'd be better to do today. So we're doing this really impromptu, and I'm thrilled about it. I sort of like impromptu, Karen. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have some really valuable information that I really want to share, and that we were able to move this up a few days is helpful because I have one of my huge annual master classes coming up. And I know how hard it can be to homeschool a child or to have your child be in school, either one, because they, especially children with autism, but many children have trouble today with focus and their ability to learn. And a lot of this comes from their biology. So Jackie, we can talk a little bit about, not only diet, but some of the other reasons why, homeschooling, it's going to be a lot easier to follow a diet at home, for one, because a lot of times at school, they're having horrible food at school, or it's hard to get them to eat what you send with them when everybody else is eating other foods. At home, you can kind of regulate that more. Maybe you have your child on some supplements. And I remember when my daughter was in elementary school, she needed enzymes before she ate because her stomach was bothering her back then. We were going through some digestive issues. And I tried to have her take enzymes at school. Well, she was caught one day. This is like in third grade. And, they made a big deal out of it. Like, your child's taking, medications. I'm like, they're enzymes. But it had to go through the nurse. So before lunch break, she had to go to the nurse's office and get them to give them to her. Well, by the time she got back into the lunchroom, half of the lunch period was over. So that was inconvenient. Or maybe your child has a lot of sensory overload issues. School can be a big trigger. There's lights, there's kids making sounds around them. The teacher might be talking too loud, the chalkboard sounds. There's just so much, and their filter has a really hard time because of those sensory issues. Whether your child's at school or at home, if they're at school, some of the tricks that we found, that we learned ourselves with my own son when I was on my journey with autism, was that the agitation in a classroom was too much. So whether you're at home or at school, very helpful to have your child either maybe do pull-ups on a pull-up bar or carry something that's kind of heavy in the classroom. The teacher could have a box of books that was just heavy enough for the muscles to have to work, and call that child up to say, hey, would you carry this to the classroom next door? It was a way to get the child to use those muscles, which calms the central nervous system. And then also they are out of the class and moving to a new environment and then coming back. Sometimes too much of the same thing can be too much for a child, especially with sensory overload issues. So it's always important to keep that in mind. Take them only as far as they're comfortable, and give them a break of whatever they need. There are things, I'm a big fan of CBD oils. CBD can be very calming. Things that can
What is CBD?
Which is hemp extract. And that is having the THC removed, so there are no I don't want to call them hallucinogenics, but it's basically a marijuana type product, a cannabinoid that has taken the THC out of it. And
so parents don't have to worry about drugs per se.
No, it's totally safe and totally legal, and it's basically like hemp oil, but it's very, very calming to the system. It helps with sensory issues, helps with picky eating issues too.
Oh, wait, tell me about this. Tell our parents about this. And I do want to get back into a little bit about the homeschooling aspect of things, but this is a real world thing, whether you homeschool your kids or not, picky eating. Tell
Yeah.
me what you know about picky eating. And also, I have a couple other questions for you. And I feel like I should know these answers, but the fact is, I don't. Um, I have been told that, okay, gosh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm good at going down rabbit holes. And then we'll come back. I've I've been told that when you're talking about a child who has autism, there's a proper way to say it. Is it like let's say I had a child that's autistic? Would it be my child is autistic, or my child who has autism? What do you think about that? And then let's circle
It
back.
can go either way, but it's a little bit more sort of politically correct to say that they have autism. Some
Like
people
they're
say their
carried.
child is autistic, but it's a lot of people prefer the term of saying they have autism because it's something that they have. They're basically, it's a label for a group of symptoms. That's why what I teach and what I'll go through thoroughly in my masterclass this weekend will be about all of the stages. Diet alone is so important, but alone it's not enough. You've got to have natural, safe, heavy metal detoxification. You've got to detoxify and support the liver and support the detox pathways. You've got to work with the co-infections. Another big trigger in school, if you're at a public school or a public, any type of a public building, is mold. Mold biotoxins will cause the brain to not be able to think clearly at all. It really, really inflame the brain. So that's very important. It's a home trigger. It's a school trigger. It could be at grandma's house. It could be at a therapist's office. A lot of people need to know about this. Again, I'll go into it in detail in the masterclass this weekend, but it is so important to understand that these co-infections can mimic the symptoms of autism. So if you work with the biology and you clear what's causing the toxic overload and inflammation, the brain then can finally be what it's supposed to be. It can do what it's supposed to do. One boy was diagnosed at age 2 with autism. He was in the second grade, told that he had told his parents he had an extremely low IQ. He just was not intelligent. Well, fortunately, his mother forged on. She found out he had Lyme, which is very common, also one of the co-infections, and mold biotoxins. And so she was able to naturally clear these up and work with them, as we do in my program. And today he's in medical school. This boy was never not intelligent. His brain was just not able to function properly. And so that's what I like to share with parents, is to know that there are things that get in the way of a child's abilities. So autism really just becomes a diagnostic label term for a lumping of symptoms. And as we know, it's a spectrum disorder because no two children are exactly the same. But it's how the brain is affected, how the inflammation and the toxins are affecting the brain and its abilities. So that's what you really want to look at. That's why we say a child with autism, because it's not like just who you are, but it's symptoms that are affecting you, or how you exhibit your symptoms.
Okay, so I want to bring a bunch of things together here. So we want to talk about things you want to consider if you're considering homeschooling, or if you are homeschooling. What I'm hearing you say, when you keep coming back to the picky eating, is that diet is something you might want to consider if you have a child who has autism. And see, this is why I asked, so I could phrase questions appropriately. So if you have a child who has autism, you might want to consider their diet a lot. And this is something that is, there's pros and cons to your kids going to school or homeschooling if they have autism. And I want to say, I am not here to tell anybody what they should do. I am here to help people think through whether this is a good idea for their family or not, and weigh the ups and downs. So that's one thing. And let's go ahead and talk about that picky eating a little bit. What are some things that parents can do if they're homeschooling? Let's go down the homeschooling road. And even if they're not homeschooling, it's when the kids get home, right? But what are things parents can do to help their children with picky eating, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how diet can affect a child's ability to learn?
So the gut controls the brain. There is a direct gut-brain axis connection. And if the gut is inflamed or also has leaky gut, which means not absorbing the nutrition from the food properly, allowing undigested food particles to get into the bloodstream. Therefore, it also, not only is it releasing toxins into the bloodstream, but it's also triggering the immune system to react as it naturally would. And now it sees a foreign agent. So this is also why you find your child has more and more allergies that they didn't used to have, because there are literally markers that the immune system puts out that says when they see this particle, now it's a foreign agent, and to react with an allergic reaction. So the most common foods that we see problems with, of course, are gluten, which is the protein in any wheat source, casein, the protein in dairy, processed carbohydrates. They also turn to sugar and feed the bad bacteria in the gut, as well as the dairy has the inflammation. The gluten has not only is so genetically modified that it has such a high gluten content these days, but it's also sprayed with glyphosate, which is the Roundup weed killer. They're spraying that on our food crops right before it's processed or to be milled, because they can dry it up faster, get it out of the market faster, and make money faster. And so that basically, we're eating Roundup, which just eats away at your gut lining. So it's another source of toxic inflammation that is eating at the gut. But so you've got all of these foods that are really causing a lot of inflammation and weakening the gut. Well, the gut controls 80% of the immune system. So if you have a weak gut, you're going to have a weak immune system. So that's number one reason you want to really strengthen it, is to strengthen your immune system. But you also need to know that dopamine, serotonin, certain neurotransmitters that support the brain. Serotonin is responsible for things like mood stability, proper sleep, appetite. Dopamine is something that helps with ability to focus and concentrate, right? So these receptors are in the gut, and they're built in the gut. Well, if our neurotransmitters, brain messengers, cannot be made properly in the gut, then the brain cannot function properly. If you've got a gut full of candida and yeast and parasites and other issues, that as well is going to harm the gut. So those have to be worked with. Just try this for a month and see what the changes are in your child, because sugar, processed carbohydrates, gluten and casein, dairy and wheat products, they actually create opiates in the system, just like the opiate drug. So that is why your child is literally addicted to these foods. Most parents say, that's all my child.
Repeat that for me.
Sorry?
Repeat that last part for me, because I know I'm like, wait, say that again. And I bet our listeners are thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Did she really say that? Yeah. So gluten and casein, the proteins in dairy, cow's milk, and wheat products, all wheat products and all dairy, especially with cow, they create opiates in the system, just like an opiate drug. So we actually crave them, and children with autism or people with a weak gut cannot flush out these opiates fast enough. Then they become addicted to it, which, just like they would a drug, you might notice your child gets really spacey before they need to eat, or they're just craving things like bread and crackers and cookies and anything with the dairy and the wheat products in them. And it's usually because they're craving these opiates. So by eliminating these foods, you're not only eliminating the inflammation that's causing the deterioration in their gut lining, but you're helping to reduce these opiates and helping to heal up the gut lining and all of that. There's a whole lot to this. It's very, very important. So, and I would say this is stage one of what I call the 5 stages of recovery, because if you don't lay a proper foundation first, it's going to be really hard to do everything else that you're doing with detoxification. You want to support the detox pathways and all of that as well. But if you start with just reducing the bad foods out of their diet. And again, that download gives you that resource as well for which foods to avoid. Then you're able to help start supporting the gut. I have parents right away that are like, oh my gosh, my child is sleeping through the night for the first time, or they can focus. They're doing so much better in school. I hear these things all the time just from diet alone before we get on to the rest of everything that needs to be done. So it's really important to do that. Yes, picky eating is going to be an issue, and there's a couple reasons for that. For one, again, the addiction. They're addicted to the sugars, the candida, if they have, which they usually do with autism, have an overload of candida, pathogenic bacteria of yeast in the gut. Those candida crave sugar. So the candida wants sugar sources. And any processed carbohydrate, dairy, wheat, all processed carbohydrates, even if it's gluten-free, you've got to watch what you're eating. They're feeding those pathogenic bacteria, and those bacteria are live organisms. They are craving those foods. So your child is craving those foods, and they're again having the opiate addiction that you've got to slowly filter out. So I would say don't rip the Band-Aid off, and it's going to make it really hard for you and your child if you try to just remove everything all in one day. Some people try to do it that way, and you can, but I think it's a lot easier on everybody if you slowly start to remove more and more of the bad foods and get more and more of the good ones in.
All right.
Because then that way it's a process, so that the behavioral issues, you'll notice there will be something called die off, which is as those bad bacteria start to die, there are more toxins released into the system, and your child's behaviors can actually get worse before they get better.
That's a good thing to know, because I think if parents don't know that, they might not continue. So I think we've addressed some of the eating things, but I would really like to move on for our listeners. What are some other things that you think parents might want to consider if they're thinking, let's say your kid is 5 years old and this is the year you're supposed to send them to kindergarten, and they're weighing everything out in their mind. Should I send my kid to school? Should I not? What are some of the things that you think a parent might want to consider if they have a child who has autism?
Well, I think just like any child, you have to look at what your child's needs are, how they do best. If their sensory overload is so extreme that if you send them to school and they can't focus, learn, they can't be there, at least until, some of the biology is healed up, because I have found that parents have said that their kids couldn't be in school, and then they worked on the biology with me and the things that we do, and then their child was then able to focus and learn and make friends, even have social connections and things that they once couldn't do. So just know that that is possible if it's not yet. It's not like, it doesn't have to be an all-time always, but you have to look at where your child is right now and see, if that's the right choice for them. Are they getting the assistance they need in school? Some kids are and some are not. At various schools, some are working with kids better than others. The staff might be more willing in some places. You also sadly have to look at the bullying factor. We do want our kids to be able to make social connections and have a social life too. So that's where you have to assess. If you're homeschooling, it's important to make sure that they get some social contact with other kids. And there are a lot of things that you can do with that. There are a lot of other homeschooling families you can get together with. Some people are doing homeschooling pods. So you want to hire an actual teacher that comes to one of the family's homes, and you can alternate homes so that if you have to work, because I know work can be a factor, maybe both parents need to work and somebody can't stay home with the child. So this is a way to allow that to happen. Maybe you could have your child in a homeschooling pod that's a much smaller environment, but not as expensive as a big, as a private school, which could be expensive. So there are a lot of really factors to look at, you know, and what is working best for your child and what isn't working for your child. So I really think that's such an individualized, you know, answer.
I do too. But I thought I want to help parents just come up with some of these ideas. And you have a lot of experience, not on only on your own, because your son, I don't know whether you say has or had autism,
He's
but
no longer diagnosable. And I was
he's
told to
not
drug him into my
diagnosable,
behavioral therapies, and there was nothing we could do for him. Now, 15 years later, he's not even diagnosable anymore.
which
So
is
that's why
phenomenal.
I'm doing what I'm doing, because I just want to help people get the optimum results for their own child, whatever they may be.
Yeah. Well, and I want to ask you to address something because I had a comment on one of my social media posts when I shared your things, and I probably should have just asked you to jump in and comment on it because I got a little flack from somebody who was like, you can't recover autism, it's not curable. And I'm sure you've heard these things. And here's why I'm interviewing Karen and why I'm bringing her back. So she has a child who had autism. And how old is he now?
He's 25 now.
25. So the opportunities for resources were much less back then. She had to do a lot of her own homework, a lot of her own research to figure out how to help her own son. And what she did was really effective. And she started sharing that with other people. But now she has a podcast that's huge. And she interviews some of the top experts in the world around autism. And so I honestly, off the top of my head, I can't remember what all of your credentials are, but what I do remember is you have experience, you've helped a lot of other people, and you are constantly learning more about the topic of autism and interviewing. I've listened to enough of your podcast. I'm not a regular listener, but I've listened to enough to say she's interviewing some top-notch people on
Yeah.
this podcast.
Yeah, I have
And
some.
so your knowledge, regardless of what your credentials may or may not say, your knowledge is phenomenal around this subject. So I want to lead parents to you to help them. And I lost my train of thought, Karen. I was going somewhere with all that. But here's what that person said. They were, I can't remember exactly what they said, but it was like, you can't cure autism. And they were just angry with me and like, rah, rah, rah. And I said, well, I'm really sorry you feel this way. You really ought to check out her resources though. And I think you might feel a little different. That was the essence of it. And I chose to just leave their comment up there for all to see because you know what? It's a valid concern. It's something people might really think and wonder about. And I had a valid answer, but you might want to learn more. And I am just somebody who is I never think I know it all. There's always more to learn. And I can take your advice or I can not, but I can at least hear it out and decide if it might be helpful for me. That's my feeling about that.
That is the best way to be. You know, I always tell parents, you don't have to listen to everything I'm saying. Just hear it, maybe go research it for yourself, see if there's validation. I have one mom who found my website on the internet, and she literally told me, I interviewed her name's Diana, and she has an amazing story. We walked her son through talk about special ed, couldn't even hid behind her, would not connect with any of the other kids. Special ed, couldn't function in special ed classes, screamed tantrums all day, couldn't speak. After about a year and a half in the program, he's had his diagnosis completely removed. He's fully verbal, has no problems with speech at all. He's been moved into a regular classroom, and now he is at the top of his class, not just regular class, but the top of his class academically. He is calm, he's happy, he has lots of friends. And, she came, when she first found my website, she said, Karen, I thought this was a hoax. I thought you were somebody who was scamming people and just trying to make money. I hear it all the time, Jackie. It's nothing new to me. And so I always tell people, look, all I'm doing is, she said, I started contacting Karen. She said this on the podcast. I interviewed her. Her name's Diana, and you can look it up on my website and listen to the whole thing if you like, her whole story from her words. And she is a researcher by nature. She's got a PhD in health research. And she said, I would ask Karen questions, and then I would, think, wow, is that right? Is that true? And so she said, then I'd go research it on my own, and I'd find out, well, yeah, it was true. So I'd come back and I'd ask Karen another question, and then she'd answer it very patiently, and then I'd go over. Finally, she joined my membership program. And then she said, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try it. And she followed it religiously, step by step, because I laid out a roadmap, step by step, all the way through. And she had tremendous results. And had she not had an open mind and the willingness to listen and learn, then her son would not have those benefits that he has today. And that's what it's about, is really just having an open mind. And we know that not every child is going to have their diagnosis removed, and that's totally okay. But kids who are getting D's and F's in school are getting A's and B's. Kids who had no friends have friends. Kids who were one or two word sentences. Even one mom, her son was 27 years old when she came to my program. She said, he only had like maybe 2 words he could say. She said after, I think it was 5 months in the program, and she still has more to do. After 5 months, she said, he's reading books with me. He's never done that before. And he's 27. Now think of all the years that mom has been trying, and she never gave up. That's another thing, is never give up. So, okay, so now he's verbal, he still has autism, and that's fine, but all of these debilitating symptoms that make life uncomfortable. Some kids who don't have independence now, or before didn't have independence, now can be independent and live an independent life.
Which is remarkable.
What for our kids, right? Healthy. Yeah. Some were hospitalized. I have 2 different parents who have given me their stories about how their kids had been in the hospital more than one time in the year prior to coming to my program. Now they're healthy. They don't even catch colds anymore. Their immune system is strong. Those are important things, because those issues lead to deeper issues, especially lifelong. Those are children. I always say too, that's why I tell the story of the woman who has a 27-year-old son. It's never too late, but why not try? What have you got to lose? I think parents get really protective in a sense that they have a lot of pain, and they sometimes are even looking for somebody to blame it on, or they feel responsible. And like, if I listen to this, it means I haven't been a good parent, or you're saying I haven't done everything I can do. I'm like, I'm not saying anything. I'm just giving you education, and you can choose to use it or not. But why wouldn't you want to listen if it's a possibility of something that could help your child?
Yeah. Well, and so I guess as I'm coming back to that original question of, about, I don't know if it's a question statement, but something to respond to, about the parent who on social media was a little upset about that, recovering, and they were really sort of, I think, hurt in a way by that. And, like you said, autism is a group of symptoms. Well, when enough of those symptoms, or any diagnosis for that matter, when enough of those symptoms are not present anymore, then that's what makes,
you call it, right?
Yeah. And I absolutely, and this is another reason I'm interviewing you, is I absolutely 100% believe diet has a huge impact on a person's mood. And I have personal experience. I, for one, am a little impacted by it. Not to the great extreme, but my youngest daughter is really impacted by her food. And by the time she was 3, it was obvious. I mean, we've got a picture to this day. My daughter before food, my daughter after food, and not just any food. And I believe for her, accumulative effects would happen. And actually for both my kids when they were younger, but more so for the youngest, where if they had too much junk food too many days in a row, let's take Halloween week. That's really tough.
Yes.
Halloween week plus it's one of my children's birthdays right after.
Mhm.
And all of that combined led to a yearly meltdown.
Right.
And it it was, just horrendous. And you could say that for a lot of other times of the year. But and now I mentioned to you when we weren't recording that my youngest daughter is really into fitness and really, I mean, watching what she eats. And I'll tell you what, even as a teenager, her mood is mucho better when she
Oh,
eats
definitely. And exercise
healthier.
is huge too. I mean, all kids should be outdoors and exercising on a regular basis. And I
Yeah.
think today there's so much screen time that they're really not getting as much of that. Before I forget too, because you had that comment, and this is what I always like to say, I never use the words cure or heal.
Mm-hmm.
And the word recovery, and I know people misread into it all the time, but the word recovery literally means in the dictionary to regain health. So
Oh,
that is why I chose that word. And I know every once in a while I'm like, okay, I have to say that over and over, even on my own social media page when somebody starts, throwing in comments or that we don't honor who their child is. That's not at all. If your child's not well and you want to just make them healthier, right? So that's
yeah.
really what the definition means. And so that's really what it's about is we want to help kids today be healthy. There are so many environmental toxins, and our food is so bad these days. You have to be, eat organic, really watch your surroundings, watch, all of the things that we're exposed to, and do what we can with what we have control over. And food is the first one. So why not make better choices? It's
Yeah.
healthier. You'll live healthier, live longer. It affects your mood, your brain. This goes for everybody. I mean, everybody is, people who are taking better care of themselves usually have a better disposition. A lot of these foods and this candida overgrowth are very, very common in most people today, and it creates a lot of irritability, a lot of agitation and anger, spaciness. You can't think clearly. So, these are all factors that come into everybody's lives and very important. But yeah, I mean, boy, if parents really just knew. And that's one tip before we wrap up, because you asked me about picky eating, and
Mm-hmm.
CBD oil again is very helpful right before you eat or periodically through the day. Also, even strengthens the immune system. Um, I know there's the company that I use their zeolites for our natural toxin binders and heavy metal detoxification. I have it pretty hyperlinked to naturallyrecoveringautism.com/HM, which stands for heavy metal. So if you go to that site, they have an excellent CBD oil. They're good quality. But a little bit of that can help. Also, and I'll go through this in the masterclass too this weekend. But if you can see this, if you massage on your neck downward from the front, my background is I'm a craniosacral therapist, which you were trying to
Yeah.
remember what that was. So I've been doing that for 30 years. But one of the things is if you massage they're called the sternocleidomastoid muscles, but the front part of the neck on the sides downward, it will actually flush out, open up the lymphatics and helps them drain. It actually opens up and allows the fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid is called, in your head to flush out. So it actually, if you do it to yourself right now, you can actually feel, as soon as I do it, I feel more alert. And that also calms the sensory issues down in the jaw. So if you do that right before eating, it can be helpful for your child, and you can teach them to do it to yourself. It's a very simple thing to do. And it's lymphatic drainage, so it helps with detoxification, and it helps to open up and flush out the toxins in the head from the flushing of the fluid in the head out. So, but for picky eating, if you do that right before you eat, it can be really helpful. And again, it feels good, and it does waken your mind up, because it's starting to flush, allow those toxins that are getting backed up in your head to flush out as well. So you can teach your child to do it to themselves, or you can do it to your child during the day, especially during learning time.
Yeah.
Do it at, whether they're at school, so they can do it to themselves, or if you're homeschooling, then they can do it to themselves at home, or you can do it to them if they're not
Younger.
remembering or don't remember. So yeah, that's just a simple technique that can
Huh.
be helpful. Yeah.
That's really neat. Karen, I love visiting with you. We're going to honor your time here. And also, I'd like to mention that we'll have the link to Karen's masterclass and then other information that she may have down the road. We'll put all the links we can in the show notes below. And we'll have a link. We have an article written all about Karen on the Homeschool Think Tank website. So we'll link to that as well. So Karen, thank you so much for being our guest today and for sharing just a snippet of your great wealth of knowledge about autism.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm happy to help. There's such a need out there, so I appreciate being able to reach more people with the resources that I have to share. So thanks, Jackie. I appreciate it.